Hello, 6th grade. This is Mrs. Froman, and you're going to take notes from Environmental Science Chapter 2, Section 5, on succession. And succession is a series of predictable changes that occur in a community over time. And what they're really talking about is like an ecosystem, a new ecosystem that develops over time. So there's two types of succession. The first one is primary succession, and that occurs where there's not a previous ecosystem. So this would be like in Hawaii when the volcanoes make a new island. So what happens is you have that just rock, and then pioneer species come in, and those are the first species to grow. And these are usually lichens and moss, so little tiny plants that grow on top of the rocks. Over time, the little tiny roots of those plants break up the rocks, and the plants die, and those all decay and become topsoil. And it may take several centuries to build up enough topsoil where you're going to get big trees and bushes growing. So here's an example. Here's in Hawaii, forming new land on Hawaii from lava. And we really won't see trees here for hundreds of years. You can see this lava flow back here. Looks like it happened a while ago. It's starting to get little plants growing on it. And then here's an example of a glacier. And it's this first picture. There's a glacier there, so it's all covered with snow. It's been that way for thousands of years. The glacier melted, and we have just rocks. And then you can kind of see in between here, it's not the great picture, but there's little tiny like moss and lichen growing in between the rocks. Then we start getting some grasses and shrubs. And over time, this turns into a great big forest. It is going to take a long time, though. The other kind of succession is called secondary succession, and this is where a series of changes that occur after a disturbance in an existing ecosystem. So it could be a fire, a hurricane, a tornado, or human activities such as farming. This occurs much more rapidly than primary succession because you already have the topsoil. So it's just going to be however long it takes for the new plants to grow. So here's an example of farming. So the first year you've got this bare field that they had just farmed. If they leave that alone, the second year we start getting grass. And by the 5th year we start getting like the bigger grasses like we have in our prairie, the big prairie grasses, and something called sedge, which is kind of like a grass. Then by 10 years you start getting some goldenrod, some shrubs, you get some little trees growing in here. And in 20 years, you get mature juniper trees, birch, maple, so it's starting to make itself into an actual forest. You can also have secondary succession with ponds. So if you have a pond, and over time, the things in the pond are going to die, the plants, the animals, it's going to rain and might wash some soil into the pond, and the pond starts getting shallower and shallower, until you pretty much just have like a little puddle here, and that won't take too long to start getting cattails and other plants growing up in there, and the pond will be completely gone. So that's another type of secondary succession. Here's an example of that happening in real life. You can see the old pond edge is right along here. If you can kind of see that edge where the grasses kind of change colors. And now this year the pond is crept in this far, and over time it'll keep creeping and creeping closer to the center until there's no pond left at all. Here's just a picture of forest succession. So you start with forbs, which just means grasses and flowers. You get shrubs, you get those smaller trees, and then what they call the climax forest would be the biggest forest is going to be. Then when those trees, either there was a fire or they die, then it's going to start all over again back with the grasses. So factors that affect succession. They're biophysical factors, which just mean things that occur sometimes because of people and sometimes because of just nature. So the climate could change. The water sources could change, like with a pond. The weather, if we have like a tornado or hurricane. The soil composition, so it depends on what the soil's made out of. And then wildlife itself can actually change things, like elephants are constantly like knocking trees completely over. Then there's natural factors, and that would be like volcanoes, fire and windstorms, floods, and soil erosion. And then man-made would be like plowing and grazing, so we plow the fields, farming, we graze our cattle on land, we harvest trees for lumber, we build lots of roads, and introducing those exotic species. So things like the emerald ash borer would be one that's affecting our area right now. That's why just last summer we had to cut down some ash trees because the ash borer got in there and killed those trees. So those can cause a lot of problems too. All right, that's it for succession notes. Don't forget to do your quack, and we'll see you in class. Bye.